Welcome to a world where clothes don't end their lives in the closet, but begin a second life in the circular flow. A world where fashion becomes digital, sustainable, and without borders. Today, I'm taking you on a journey into the future of fashion and clothing, a future that has already begun.
Polish clothing and textiles. This is a sector with traditions dating back to the 19th century. In 2022, more than 36,000 companies were registered in the textile industry, and the market revenue exceeded 50 billion PLN. As one of the leading textile exporters in the region, we now face many challenges. The amount of textile waste is increasing every year. Currently, we generate more than 2 million tons annually. What can we do to change that? More and more often, we look to the past for answers, to what already exists. Second-hand clothing is becoming a symbol of a new lifestyle, conscious and economical.
Moda vintage kojarzy się z czasami PRL.
Vintage fashion is associated with the times of the Polish People's Republic, with our mothers and grandmothers who used to sew their own clothes and look for little treasures for themselves. And now we perceive those clothes as something very valuable, fashionable and precious, because they have already come from someone else's wardrobe. The trend for vintage fashion in Poland began quite recently, I think only a few years ago, at most 10, according to my observations. Before that, there were only the typical thrift shops and second-hand stores that everyone knew. However, vintage is something new. Vintage fashion is more curated. All those treasures are carefully selected, well-kept, fragrant and clean. It is clothing with a soul. These are items that someone has already worn before, and behind them lies a story. Someone once wore them, perhaps for a special occasion. Nowadays, second-hand fashion is associated with something completely different than just a few years ago. People appreciate it now because each piece carries history, and they are often willing to pay a higher price precisely for that reason, because it is something unique. In the past, shopping in a second-hand store was all about finding the cheapest clothes possible. Now it is something more because we also consider ecology and the circularity of fashion. We know how much overproduction there is in the world, how many litres of water and natural resources are consumed by clothing production. The amount of clothing that already exists on the market is so large that we could dress several future generations with it. People are beginning to appreciate more and more that vintage is connected not only with aesthetics, but also with ecology and circularity. It is not only about a nice look or following the latest trends. Paradoxically, we can actually find all the latest trends within vintage fashion, not only in stores selling new clothing. In fact, everything in fashion has already existed before. In modern times, when our planet is already so damaged by humankind, it is truly very important to promote ideas such as saving the planet through second-hand clothing. That is, not producing new items, but using what already exists. In my work, the knowledge that I have gathered over many years is also important. Knowledge about recognizing materials, understanding what each fabric is intended for, and in what situations it will serve us best. The key is that we can recognize good quality by touch and learn what natural fabrics are and why it is worth choosing them, not only for our body and comfort, but also for the planet. For example, polyester is simply plastic that decomposes for hundreds or even thousands of years, and it harms our planet. In my work, I try to educate people about this, that it is worth choosing natural materials. In my boutique, such fabrics are mainly available. Materials that are a huge advantage include wool, silk, linen, cotton, and all kinds of viscose. The materials we avoid are primarily polyester and acrylic, and we say a firm no to them. This all sprouted from my passion. It gives me great joy, but I also know that I am doing something good for the world. I am promoting a wonderful, ecological, and conscious idea that is also, in a way, modern. The world is changing, and fashion is changing too. So let us go for it. Let us embrace second-hand fashion, save the planet, save those clothes, and dress stylishly at the same time.
In Poland, new initiatives are emerging whose direction could shape the future of the entire industry. Upcycling, recycling, and designing with textile waste represent an innovative approach within the sector.
Fortunately, fashion is moving in a more conscious direction towards circular fashion, which focuses on making the most of already existing resources and creating something new and innovative from the clothing we already have. The fashion of the future is the embodiment of circular fashion. the kind that truly makes use of existing materials. In fact, the fashion of the future is not only about the resources and fabrics we use, but also about eco-design, paying attention to the entire production process, from the raw material through manufacturing using high-quality fabrics.
Surowca przez właśnie proces produkcji, wykorzystanie jakościowych materiałów. I to, co ciekawe...
What is interesting is that the fashion of the future also includes the use of generative tools in the process of clothing production, precisely to reduce and minimize the amount of materials used for prototypes.
Tą ilość surowców, które są wykorzystywane do prototypów, coraz bardziej są popularne.
Concepts such as eco-design, fashion of the future, upcycling and recycling are becoming more and more popular. These terms all refer to reusing existing resources.
Już istniejących surowców.
Upcycling means transforming existing clothes into garments or textiles of higher quality. In this case, we look not only at the quality, but also at aesthetics. Looking at the garments we had the opportunity to see during the Designers Play Sustain Gala, these are truly high fashion creations. However, what is important for us is that they remain functional pieces, clothes that we can use in everyday life. The quality of materials is extremely important, primarily because we wear them every day and we need them to be comfortable and healthy for us. This means we pay attention to what raw materials they are made from and whether these fabrics are safe for our bodies. It is also important to consider the production process itself, the conditions in which the garments were made. Our foundation is the initiator of the fashion of the future. Through all our initiatives, we aim to raise consumer awareness in the direction of ecological fashion, the kind that supports not only people but also the environment. The idea behind creating the Play Sustain Foundation came from the desire to influence the reduction of overproduction and overconsumption of textiles. Education is our fundamental pillar. The Foundation implements it through 3 key projects: Designers Play Sustain, a competition for young upcycling fashion designers, meaning designers of the fashion of the future; the Play Sustain Summit, an industry conference where we invite experts to speak about fashion trends, what is important and new in the market; and the Play Sustain Academy, not only a series of podcasts and webinars, but also, starting in October, postgraduate studies in fashion brand management in a circular economy. The Designers Play Sustain competition serves as a platform for young designers to familiarize themselves with upcycling fashion, to make full use of the resources that already exist. The competition is not only about the final gala, it is an entire educational process lasting half a year, whose goal is to introduce designers into the circular world. We educate them in innovation, business and entrepreneurship, areas that a designer does not usually deal with on a daily basis. This year, the competition had 2 categories. The first one was upcycling ready-to-wear, outfits presented on the runway and designed in a traditional way. The second, new category was digital to AI, a category in which clothing is designed using generative tools, that is, artificial intelligence. This is a significant element, as this is the direction we are heading in, and it will certainly become an inseparable part of the future. Our goal is to show how to do it properly. Based on virtual projects, real garments are created. The process serves to support design and production, rather than being just an addition. It is truly an innovative element and will undoubtedly be essential in the future.
Elementem, który rzeczywiście jest innowacyjny i na pewno będzie bardzo potrzebny w przyszłości.
Upcycling fashion is about giving a second life to materials and secondary raw resources. Let us say I have an old used jacket that comes from a clothing sorting facility, and I remake it to give it greater value. I also work within the circular fashion system, meaning I try to keep my production cycle closed, so that clothes keep circulating and do not end up, for example, in the trash or at a landfill. It is also about raising awareness among my customers and audience, showing them that clothing should not be thrown away, but instead sent for recycling. We must be aware that every second a truckload of used clothes ends up in a landfill somewhere in the world. That is why such initiatives and businesses are very much needed, because today we simply have too many clothes. Garments are being thrown away, and very often people do not know what to do with them because no one has ever taught us that. We are not conscious of this, and we have never learned that all of these clothes are flooding our planet. No one has ever told us how to reuse them. This is one of the first jackets I ever made, with fringes. It was an old denim jacket from my childhood. I created it for a contest where you had to design a styling to win a festival ticket. So I made the jacket, and when I wore it in the city, many people stopped me, asking where I got it, and what it was, and so on. At that time, I did not know that what I had done was called upcycling. I simply saw the potential of that garment. I created something, and suddenly people wanted to know where it came from, and they wanted to buy it. I do it because my intuition and passion guide me. In the beginning, it was pure passion. Only later did it turn into a business. I never planned to sell so many clothes, to present my clothes on international markets and fashion weeks, or to conduct workshops for hundreds of people every year. These are very labor-intensive projects that cannot be made in a single day. They are patchworks, created from used fabrics. Everything is handmade. I am personally involved in each project that comes to life, and that is how it is. I also created my brand because not enough people talk about these things. A few years ago, I discovered the truth that the fashion industry is one of the largest emitters of carbon dioxide. It generates the most CO2 and creates massive amounts of waste. Clothes that nobody wears anymore in Europe are often shipped to Africa, to places like the Atacama Desert, which has become the world's textile landfill. It is terrifying when we realize that each of us is one of the pieces of that puzzle contributing to this global dump. My brand is also about slowing down the pace, noticing that there is a potential in a used jacket, that there is real value in the old clothes we already have in our wardrobes. My first garments were made from my grandmother's clothes. She was a seamstress and later became ill with Alzheimer's disease. I took her materials and used them to create a brand that I believe now has enormous global potential. And speaking of used clothing, it's not just that I make and sell them. For the past 7 years, I have not bought a single new piece of clothing, as a kind of personal manifesto. The shirt I'm wearing today is one I always put on for important events. Every time I go to the final show of my collection, I wear it. It is a shirt my grandmother bought for me when I was 14 years old, for 1 zloty and 34 grosze in a thrift shop. I promised myself that for the rest of my life, I would stay in shape so that I could keep wearing that shirt. The future of fashion is also unfolding in the digital world. Clothes that exist only virtually allow designers to experiment without leaving a carbon footprint, and consumers to express themselves without physical production.
Jeśli chodzi o modę we współczesnym świecie, to dla mnie jest to język komunikacji.
When it comes to fashion in the modern world, for me, it is a language of communication, a way of expressing oneself and a tool for responding to social needs. As for my personal approach to fashion, I am primarily an advocate of universal design. I believe that the resources we have are very limited and should be examined carefully from every angle before being used. That is why, above all, a designer must design thoughtfully. To design something well, one must first study the real needs of users. Every designer must always remember that they are designing for the body, for a specific body, for someone. Only after that can we fulfill our own creative needs. However, we must always keep in mind the person we are designing for. Functionality is often treated as something obvious, while more attention is given to the idea of fashion as art. Fashion is art, but it is the art of design, and design must always serve someone. If from the very beginning we design clothing that is functional, comfortable, and responsive to the real needs of its users, then we will also waste fewer resources. When it comes to the future of fashion, I truly wish for it to be mindful, responsive to social needs, and caring. Both for the environment and the resources we have. For this reason, for example, the system of permaculture design is an excellent model that can also be applied to fashion design, because it is based on care for people, care for the earth, and fair distribution.
Bardzo inspirującym momentem w moim myśleniu o nowych
A very inspiring moment in my thinking about new design systems was taking part in the Play Sustain competition in the Digital to AI category.
na temat właśnie procesów projektowych.
It forced me to think in a completely new way about design processes supported by artificial intelligence.
I w jaki sposób możemy wykorzystać.
I was able to closely observe what and how we can use it for, and where we should still leave creativity entirely to humans and the designer. I also discovered moments where artificial intelligence can strongly support us. A very interesting element that uses artificial intelligence and can support sustainable development is the concept of virtual fitting rooms. I think this is something worth implementing in both the design process and in sales.
Wykorzystać w swoim procesie i w sprzedaży.
A virtual fitting room is a space in the digital environment where we can try on a piece of clothing on an avatar that resembles us, matching our body type and measurements. We can even combine it with items from our own wardrobe, adjusting colors and styles. This way, we do not waste physical resources or garments, and we do not have to order and return items, which would generate additional carbon dioxide emissions. In my design practice, I try to represent the real world. That is why I generate images that include people in wheelchairs, people using leg prosthetics, and older individuals.
Starsze osoby, czyli pokazuje świat realny. Myślę, że to jest ciekawy obszar też dla projektantów odzieży.
I aim to portray a real world, and I think this is a fascinating area for clothing designers, to create real-looking people wearing real garments.
Jeśli chodzi o przyszłość mody,
As for the future of fashion, for me, the ideal solution would be regenerative fashion. Fashion that not only does not consume resources, but also supports and restores what we already have.
Myślę tutaj na przykład o
I
wykorzystaniu
am thinking, for example, of materials like wool, which can later be composted and used to strengthen ecological systems. The phenomenon of virtual fashion, both in Poland and around the world, is a concept that is still developing. The possibilities of virtual fashion are currently being explored, and in Poland, this field is only beginning to be understood. I have the impression that only recently terms such as virtual fashion or digital fashion have started to appear here. I often try to build my projects around ideas related to quantum physics. That is why I am fascinated by fashion that might represent the future. Fashion created in laboratories, which does not require sewing studios, but rather a team of scientists working on new fabrics and new technological solutions.
Zbioru naukowców, którzy będą pracowali nad nowymi tkaninami, nad nowymi rozwiązaniami. To jest jedna z moich pierwszych.
This is one of the first virtual spaces I built, my own virtual gallery, where I invited collaborators to present their projects.
Osoby, z którymi miałam współpracować, żeby przedstawić jakieś swoje projekty.
For example, here are designs of costumes I created for the Powszechny Theatre for one of their performances. Over here are photos from another theatre production I worked on. In this space, I can walk around as if in a video game, but it is also a space that can be entered using VR goggles.
Tutaj jak w gierce, ale to jest też przestrzeń, do której można wejść w goglach VR.
This is the program in which I probably spend most of my time. It is where I design shoes, handbags, and all kinds of accessories,
I wszystkie dodatki i nakładam.
and where I dress avatars in virtual costumes.
Tutaj jest akurat awatar, nad którym
Here is the avatar I'm currently working on. It is me. I scanned my own head, and now I'm at the stage of designing shoes for this character.
na etapie projektowania butów dla tej postaci. Projekt, który zrobiłam.
The project was created for the Play Sustain competition, and I am planning to print it on a 3D printer.
Do tego, żeby go wydrukować na drukarce 3D, bo właśnie uważam, że
I believe that 3D printing is an amazing extension of real-world design, because shapes that would be very difficult to sculpt by hand can simply be transformed from a virtual object into a physical one through printing.
ręcznie możemy po prostu przenieść taki wirtualny, żeby stworzyć taką sylwetkę modową, wirtualną. Potrzebnych jest dość sporo
To
programów.
create a single virtual fashion silhouette, quite a few programs are needed. When I design one figure, I often have as many as 8 programs open at once. One for designing the clothing structure, another for creating textures, another for building avatars, then another to merge the clothing with the avatar, and yet another one for animation. The process of creating a full collection of virtual garments is basically a repetition of this entire process, only applied to several figures. I try to create a different avatar for each project, so that it is not too uniform, and each avatar can express its own personality. What I love most about virtual fashion is its lack of boundaries. The fact that one can bring out different forms of one's subconscious being. These identities can express themselves in the virtual world, not only through clothing or the cut of the garment, but also through the avatar itself. In this way, one can build and express one's personal identity.
The fashion of the future is not only about new materials, new technologies, or creative designs. It's a mindset that connects production, consumption, and responsibility. Poland has the opportunity not just to be a subcontractor, but a leader in ethical production, circular economy, and digital solutions.